The message arrived on a Tuesday morning at the Arecibo Observatory, though the ancient dish had been silent for decades. Dr. Sarah Chen was reviewing atmospheric data from the new orbital arrays when her assistant Marcus burst through her office door, face flushed with excitement and terror in equal measure. "Sarah, you need to see this. The old radio telescope. It's receiving something. Something impossible." Chen frowned, pushing her glasses up her nose. "Marcus, Arecibo hasn't functioned since the collapse in 2020. The dish is practically scrap metal." "That's just it. The dish isn't receiving anything. The signal is coming through the quantum entanglement array we installed last month for the deep space communication tests. But the signal, it's being translated automatically by our AI systems into something we can understand." Minutes later, Chen stood in the cramped control room of the rebuilt facility, staring at scrolling text on multiple monitors. The message was simple, elegant, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. "Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet from the star you call Sol. We are the Zalani Collective, representatives of the greater galactic community. We have monitored your species' development for several of your centuries and believe you have reached the necessary level of technological and social advancement to join our peaceful Federation of Worlds. We extend this invitation with hope and friendship." Chen's hands trembled as she read the words again. First contact. After decades of searching, listening, hoping, they had finally found humanity. Or rather, humanity had been found. "There's more," Marcus said quietly. "They've been sending additional data streams, star charts, basic linguistic protocols, even what appears to be cultural exchange information. Sarah, they're not just saying hello. They're trying to establish formal diplomatic relations." Over the following hours, the facility transformed into a hive of activity. Government officials arrived in unmarked vehicles. Linguists, xenobiologists, and diplomatic specialists were flown in from around the globe. The message was simultaneously the most closely guarded secret and the most significant event in human history. Dr. Chen found herself at the center of humanity's first interstellar diplomatic crisis. The Zalani, as they called themselves, were remarkably patient. Their communications suggested a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and social development. They offered technological gifts, cultural exchanges, and membership in what they described as a vast network of intelligent species spanning thousands of star systems. The aliens painted a picture of a galaxy teeming with life, governed by principles of mutual cooperation and peaceful coexistence. They spoke of worlds where disease had been eliminated, where energy was unlimited, where conflicts were resolved through advanced mediation techniques that satisfied all parties. It was utopia made manifest, and they were offering humanity a seat at the table. Secretary of State Jennifer Morrison arrived on the third day, along with a team of negotiators who had spent their careers dealing with earthly diplomatic challenges. None of them had ever imagined they would be crafting humanity's response to an alien civilization. "What do they want?" Morrison asked during the first formal briefing. Chen consulted her notes, still struggling to believe she was having this conversation. On the surface, nothing. They claim the galactic community operates on principles of enlightened self-interest. More diverse member species means more diverse solutions to universal challenges. They see humanity as having unique perspectives that could benefit everyone. And beneath the surface? Chen hesitated. They've been remarkably forthcoming about their technology, their social structures, even their resource distribution methods. But there are gaps. They haven't explained their selection criteria in detail, or why they've been observing us for centuries without making contact until now. And some of their technology descriptions are concerning. Morrison leaned forward. Concerning how? They casually mention things like planetary atmospheric modification, stellar engineering, and something they call cognitive harmonization for member species. When we asked for clarification on that last one, they said it helps new species integrate more smoothly into the community by reducing destructive psychological traits. The room fell silent. Marcus, who had been monitoring incoming transmissions, looked up from his console with a troubled expression. There's something else. I've been analyzing the quantum signature of their communications. The signal isn't coming from deep space. It's originating from somewhere in our own solar system. Close. Very close. Morrison's face went pale. How close? Based on the quantum entanglement decay patterns, I'd estimate somewhere between Earth and Mars. They're not just talking to us from across the galaxy. They're here. The implications crashed over the room like a cold wave. If the Zalani had ships in the solar system, they had been watching humanity far more closely than their messages suggested. They had the capability to travel interstellar distances and had positioned themselves within striking distance of Earth before even announcing their presence. Chen felt her scientific excitement warring with a growing sense of unease. The Zalani's messages continued to arrive with clockwork regularity, each one more enticing than the last. They offered solutions to climate change, technologies that could eliminate poverty and disease, and access to resources that would make the entire concept of scarcity obsolete. It was everything humanity had dreamed of since first looking up at the stars. But their very perfection was what troubled her most. "Dr. Chen," Morrison said during a private conversation later that evening, "I need your honest assessment. Are we looking at humanity's greatest opportunity or its greatest threat?" Chen stared out the window at the Puerto Rican landscape, where the rebuilt radio telescope pointed toward the stars. "I don't know. Their technology is clearly far advanced beyond ours. Their social systems seem genuinely peaceful. But, they're offering us everything we want. In my experience, when something seems too good to be true, it usually is. And the fact that they've been watching us for centuries without revealing themselves suggests a level of calculation that makes me uncomfortable. Why now? What changed?" Morrison nodded grimly. "My thoughts exactly. I've been in enough negotiations to know when someone is being selectively honest. They're telling us what they want us to know, not necessarily what we need to know." The breakthrough came on the 7th day of contact. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a linguist specializing in alien communication patterns, discovered something disturbing in the Zalani messages. Buried in the complex quantum data streams were secondary signals, communications the aliens were having among themselves that weren't meant for human interpretation. "They're debating," Vasquez explained to the assembled team, "not about whether to make contact, but about implementation timelines. They keep referring to something called integration protocols and resistance mitigation, and there are references to other species, dozens of them, that went through similar invitation processes." Chen felt her blood chill. "What happened to those other species?" That's where it gets interesting. The secondary communications suggest that some species required what they call adjustment periods after joining the community. One reference mentions a species that took 3 planetary rotations to achieve cognitive harmonization after initial resistance to integration protocols. Morrison's voice was deadly quiet. "Are you telling me they've done this before? That other species have resisted and been adjusted?" "It's worse than that," Vasquez continued. "I found multiple references to species that were incompatible with community standards and required permanent remediation. The quantum signatures suggest these communications are completely automated, like they're following a standardized procedure." The truth began to crystallize in Chen's mind with horrifying clarity. The Zalani weren't offering humanity membership in a galactic community. They were following a conquest protocol disguised as diplomacy. The centuries of observation hadn't been benevolent monitoring, but intelligence gathering, studying human psychology and social structures to determine the most effective approach for assimilation. We need to stall, Morrison decided. Buy time while we figure out how to respond to this. If they have ships in the solar system, we're not exactly in a position to fight them. But we can't just roll over either. Chen nodded, but her mind was already racing ahead to darker possibilities. If the Zilani had been observing humanity for centuries, they undoubtedly knew about Earth's military capabilities, its technological limitations, and its political divisions. They would have planned for resistance. The question was whether humanity had any advantages the aliens hadn't accounted for. Over the next few days, the response team crafted carefully worded messages expressing humanity's interest while requesting more detailed information about the integration process. The Zilani responses became noticeably less patient, with subtle undertones suggesting that prolonged deliberation was unusual and potentially problematic. It was during this tense diplomatic dance that Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. Sarah, I've been monitoring space around the solar system using our deep space tracking arrays. You know how the Zilani claimed they're peaceful explorers? Yes. I'm detecting massive energy signatures moving into position around Earth. Whatever ships they have out there, they're not exploration vessels. The power readings are consistent with weapons platforms. Big ones. Chen felt the last of her hope crumble. The Zilani hadn't come to invite humanity into a peaceful federation. They had come to add another species to their collection, and they had the firepower to enforce compliance if their diplomatic overtures failed. As night fell over Puerto Rico, Dr. Sarah Chen stood beneath the stars that had once seemed full of infinite possibility. Now they felt like eyes watching from the darkness, calculating and cold. Humanity stood at the threshold of a new era, but it was beginning to look like it might be their last era as a free species. The Zilani ships were moving into position, their diplomatic messages becoming more insistent with each passing hour. Earth's governments were scrambling to coordinate a response to a threat they barely understood, while time ran out for the human race. Chen looked up at the constellation where the alien signals originated and wondered if anyone would hear humanity's cry for help when the real invasion began. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's most advanced warship, watching Earth grow smaller in the viewscreen. The ship had been humanity's best-kept secret for 15 years. Built in the shadow of Saturn's rings using technology reverse-engineered from a crashed meteorite that turned out to be something far more interesting than space rock. Admiral, we're receiving the final transmission from Earth Command, Communications Officer Torres reported. The Zilani ultimatum was delivered 3 hours ago. They're demanding a formal response within 24 hours, or they'll begin what they call pacification protocols. Hayes nodded grimly. The meteorite that had crashed in Siberia in 2019 had contained fragments of technology that human scientists couldn't fully understand, but could partially replicate. The discovery had led to a secret international project to build humanity's first true warship, hidden from the public and powered by exotic matter engines that bent space-time itself. It was humanity's ace in the hole, and now it might be their only hope. Status on our approach to the Zilani fleet? Hayes asked. We're 18 hours out from their primary formation. Long-range sensors show 12 vessels arranged in a standard blockade pattern around Earth. Each ship is approximately 3 kilometers in length, Admiral. They're massive. Hayes had seen the intelligence reports. The Zilani ships dwarfed anything humanity had ever built, even the Defiance. But size wasn't everything in space combat, and the aliens had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed humanity was as helpless as they appeared. The Defiance was more than just a warship. It was a technological hybrid that combined human ingenuity with principles borrowed from the crashed alien technology. Its weapon systems operated on theories that human physicists were still trying to understand, and its stealth capabilities allowed it to remain invisible to conventional detection methods. Dr. Reeves, Hayes called to the ship's chief scientist, What's our status on the quantum disruption array? Dr. Michael Reeves looked up from his console, his face drawn with exhaustion and determination. The array is functioning within acceptable parameters, Admiral. We've managed to weaponize the quantum entanglement principles we discovered in the meteorite fragments. If our calculations are correct, we can disrupt their communication networks and potentially overload their power systems. And if our calculations are wrong? Then we're about to fire the galaxy's most expensive firework. Hayes allowed herself a small smile. Human humor in the face of extinction. It was one of the things that might actually give them an edge. The Zilani communications had revealed a species that operated on rigid protocols and calculated efficiency. They might not be prepared for the chaotic creativity that humanity could bring to a fight. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of revelation and preparation. After Dr. Chen's team discovered the true nature of the Zilani invitation, governments around the world had finally disclosed the existence of the Defiance Project. The ship had been built as humanity's insurance policy against exactly this scenario, though nobody had really believed they would ever need to use it. Admiral, we're receiving a priority transmission from the lunar defense stations, Torres announced. Put it through. The voice of General Martinez, commander of humanity's secret lunar military installations, crackled through the speakers. Admiral Hayes, we've been monitoring the Zilani fleet movements. 3 of their ships have moved into low Earth orbit and are beginning what appears to be atmospheric analysis. We think they're preparing to deploy some kind of biological or chemical agent. Hayes felt ice form in her stomach. Timeline, General? Best estimate is 6 to 8 hours before deployment begins. Admiral, they're not planning to occupy Earth. They're planning to sterilize it and start over. The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the exotic matter engines. Hayes had known the stakes were high, but the reality of total human extinction was still difficult to process. Every person she had ever known, every city she had ever visited, every piece of human culture and achievement could be gone within hours. Dr. Reeves, she said quietly, I need to know. Can we hurt them? Reeves looked up from his calculations, his expression serious. Admiral, the quantum disruption array is based on principles we don't fully understand. We know it can interfere with quantum-based communication and power systems because we've tested it on our own equipment. The Zilani ships appear to operate on similar principles, but more advanced. In theory, yes, we can hurt them. In practice, we're about to find out if human desperation can overcome alien technology. Hayes walked to the center of the bridge, looking out at the star field that contained both her home world and the fleet that intended to destroy it. The Defiance was alone out here, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire species on its shoulders. All stations, this is the Admiral. In approximately 16 hours, we will engage an enemy fleet that outguns us, outnumbers us, and has technology centuries beyond our own. They think they're dealing with a primitive species that will surrender or die quietly. They're about to learn something about humanity that their centuries of observation couldn't teach them. She paused, looking around at the faces of her crew. They were young and old, from dozens of different countries, representing the best of human military and scientific achievement. They were also probably about to die, and they all knew it. We're not fighting for victory today. We're fighting to send a message, to show them that humanity doesn't go quietly into extinction. That every species they've conquered and harmonized deserved better. That their perfect galactic community was built on the bones of civilizations that had just as much right to exist as they do. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, the ship's tactical officer, spoke up. Admiral, what if we do more than just send a message? What if we actually win? Hayes looked at her, seeing the desperate hope in her eyes that was reflected throughout the bridge crew. Then, Commander, we go home and figure out how to protect our world from the next fleet they send. But let's focus on surviving the next 16 hours first. As the Defiance approached the outer edge of the Zalani Formation, the true scale of what they were attempting became clear. The alien ships were massive, their hulls covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Energy readings suggested shields and weapon systems that could crack planets, and their formation showed the kind of tactical sophistication that came from conquering dozens of worlds. "Admiral, we're detecting increased activity from the lead Zalani vessel," Torres reported. "They're scanning our approach vector, but our stealth systems appear to be holding. They can't see us yet." Hayes nodded. The stealth technology was another gift from the mysterious meteorite, allowing the Defiance to bend light and energy around itself. It wouldn't hold up under close examination, but it might give them the element of surprise they needed. "Dr. Reeves, begin charging the quantum disruption array. All weapons systems to ready status. Commander Kim, plot firing solutions for the 3 ships in low Earth orbit. If we're going to do this, we take out the ones threatening our world first." "Aye, Admiral. Firing solutions locked and ready." The Defiance crept closer to the Zalani fleet, its crew holding their breath as they approached weapons range. On the main screen, Earth appeared as a small blue dot, beautiful and fragile against the darkness of space. Somewhere on that dot were 8 billion people going about their daily lives, unaware that their continued existence depended on the actions of one ship and its crew. "Admiral, we're at optimal firing range," Kim reported. "Quantum disruption array at full charge." Hayes took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either save humanity or signal the beginning of its final chapter. Either way, the galaxy was about to learn that human beings didn't surrender easily. "Fire!" The Defiance erupted in a burst of exotic energy that tore through space toward the Zalani ships. The quantum disruption array unleashed forces that human science barely understood, targeting the alien vessel's power cores and communication networks. For a moment, space itself seemed to ripple and bend around the energy discharge. Then the alien ships began to die. The lead vessel's shields flickered and collapsed as its power systems overloaded. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as critical systems failed in cascade failures. The second ship tried to maneuver away from the expanding field of quantum disruption, but its engines stuttered and died, leaving it drifting helplessly as its hull began to buckle. "My God," Dr. Reeves whispered. "It's working. It's actually working." But Hayes knew better than to celebrate yet. The Zalani fleet still numbered 9 ships, and they were beginning to respond to the surprise attack. Energy readings spiked as massive weapon systems came online, and space around the Defiance began to fill with hostile targeting scans. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Hayes ordered. "Recharge the quantum array and prepare for return fire. This fight is just beginning." The battle for Earth's survival had started, and humanity had drawn first blood. But the real test was yet to come. The Zalani response was swift and terrifying. Beams of coherent energy lanced through space where the Defiance had been moments before, each shot capable of vaporizing a city block. But Admiral Hayes had anticipated this, and the human warship danced between the attacks with an agility that seemed impossible for something so large. "Admiral, they're trying to establish a communication lock on our position," Torres reported. "Their targeting systems are more sophisticated than we anticipated." "Then we don't give them a stationary target," Hayes replied. "Helm, execute pattern Delta 7. Keep us moving and make sure we stay in their blind spots." The Defiance spiraled through 3-dimensional space, using gravity wells and solar interference to mask its position. The exotic matter engines responded instantly to Hayes's commands, bending space-time to achieve maneuvers that would have been impossible with conventional propulsion. Dr. Reeves was hunched over his instruments, sweat beading on his forehead as he monitored the quantum disruption array. "Admiral, I'm reading massive power fluctuations in the remaining Zalani ships. They're adapting their systems to compensate for our attack. The next quantum burst won't be as effective. Hayes had expected this. The aliens hadn't conquered half the galaxy by being unable to adapt to new threats. But adaptation took time, and time was something the Zilani fleet didn't have as much of as they thought. Commander Kim, status on conventional weapons? Plasma cannons are charged and ready. Kinetic penetrators are loaded. But Admiral, their shields are still operating at 70% efficiency even after the quantum disruption. Our conventional weapons might not be enough to breach their defenses. Hayes looked at the tactical display showing the positions of the remaining 9 alien vessels. 3 were moving to intercept the Defiance directly, while the others were repositioning to create a kill box that would eliminate any chance of escape. It was a classic pincer maneuver executed with mechanical precision. But Hayes hadn't survived 20 years of space combat by being predictable. Dr. Reeves, can we overload the quantum array? Push it beyond safe parameters? Reeves looked up from his console, his face pale. Yes, but the feedback could destroy the ship. We'd get one massive pulse that could potentially disable their entire fleet, but we'd die in the process. Most likely, yes. Hayes considered this for a moment, weighing the survival of her crew against the survival of her species. It was the kind of calculation she had hoped never to make, but command meant making impossible choices. Admiral, Lieutenant Torres interrupted. I'm detecting something on the long-range sensors. Multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. Distance, approximately 4 million kilometers and closing fast. Hayes felt her heart sink. Reinforcements? No, ma'am. The energy signatures are different. These ships... Admiral, I think they're human. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this impossible information. Humanity had exactly one warship, and it was currently engaged in a losing battle against an alien invasion fleet. There were no other human vessels in the outer system. Put the sensor data on the main screen, Hayes ordered. The display showed a formation of 12 ships approaching at high speed. They were smaller than the Zilani vessels, but moved with the same kind of coordinated precision. As they drew closer, details became visible that made Hayes' breath catch in her throat. The ships were human in design, but like nothing she had ever seen. They incorporated the same exotic technology as the Defiance, but refined and improved beyond anything Earth's scientists had achieved. Their hulls bore insignias that included the flags of Earth, but also symbols she didn't recognize. Admiral, Dr. Reeves said quietly, I'm reading quantum signatures that match our technology, but the power levels are off the charts. These ships are operating on principles we haven't even theorized yet. Before Hayes could respond, the communications system crackled to life with a transmission from the approaching fleet. UES Defiance! This is Admiral Chen commanding the Terran Colonial Fleet. We're moving to assist. Please maintain your current engagement pattern and prepare for coordinated attack. Hayes stared at the screen in shock. Admiral Chen. The only Chen she knew who might command a fleet was Dr. Sarah Chen from the Arecibo Observatory, but that was impossible. Unless... Admiral Chen, Hayes responded, please identify yourself and explain how you have a colonial fleet when humanity has never established colonies outside the solar system. The response came with a hint of amusement in the voice. Admiral Hayes, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. I believe we have some explaining to do, but it will have to wait until we deal with our mutual problem. The short version is that your meteorite crash in 2019 wasn't the first time we've encountered alien technology. The implications hit Hayes like a physical blow. The secret space program that had produced the Defiance hadn't been humanity's only response to discovering alien technology. Somehow, somewhere, there had been another program that had achieved things beyond her wildest imagination. Dr. Chen, are you telling me that humanity has had space colonies this entire time? Not exactly, Admiral. We've had off-world facilities since 2005, but they weren't colonies in the traditional sense. They were research stations and shipyards, hidden in the outer system and beyond. When we detected the Zilani approach 3 months ago, we recalled all available assets to defend Earth. 3 months. The aliens had been in the solar system for 3 months, and there had been humans out there watching them, preparing for this moment. Hayes felt a mixture of relief and betrayal that was difficult to process. But there was no time for emotional processing. The Zilani fleet had detected the approaching human ships and was reforming their battle line to engage multiple threats. Energy readings spiked as they brought additional weapon systems online. All human vessels, this is Admiral Hayes. Coordinate targeting solutions and prepare for simultaneous attack. We need to hit them hard and fast before they can adapt to fighting multiple opponents. The next few minutes were a blur of coordinated destruction that redefined Hayes's understanding of space combat. The colonial fleet fought with a precision and ferocity that spoke of extensive combat experience. Their weapon systems tore through Zilani shields like paper, while their maneuvering capabilities made them nearly impossible to target effectively. The quantum disruption array on the Defiance, combined with the advanced weaponry of the colonial fleet, proved devastating to the alien ships. One by one, the massive Zilani vessels began to fail as their systems overloaded and their hulls breached under concentrated fire. The flagship of the alien fleet made one final, desperate gambit. It launched what appeared to be a suicide attack directly at Earth, its engines overloading to achieve maximum speed. But Admiral Chen's flagship intercepted it, ramming the alien vessel with shields blazing and weapons firing until both ships disappeared in a flash of exotic energy that lit up the solar system. When the light faded, the Zilani fleet was gone. Debris scattered across millions of kilometers of space was all that remained of the massive ships that had threatened human extinction just hours before. Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking at the tactical display that showed empty space where the enemy fleet had been. Around her, the crew was cheering and embracing, celebrating humanity's impossible victory. But Hayes felt only a profound sense of questions that needed answers. "Admiral Hayes," came a transmission from one of the surviving colonial ships. "This is Captain Torres of the TCS Independence. Admiral Chen's ship was destroyed in the final engagement, but her last order was to escort you back to Earth for debriefing. There are people who need to speak with you." Over the following hours, as the combined human fleet made its way back to Earth, Hayes learned the truth about humanity's secret expansion into the galaxy. The meteorite that had crashed in Siberia had indeed been alien technology, but it hadn't been the first contact. For decades, a secret international organization had been recovering alien artifacts from crash sites around the world, slowly building humanity's technological capabilities in preparation for the day when Earth would face a genuine threat from the stars. The colonial fleet represented the culmination of that preparation. Hidden shipyards in the asteroid belt and beyond the orbit of Neptune had been building vessels for 15 years, while secret research stations had been developing the technologies needed to ensure humanity's survival. The entire operation had been funded and staffed by personnel who had officially died in various accidents and incidents, allowing them to work without drawing attention from Earth's governments or the alien observers who had been watching humanity for centuries. Dr. Sarah Chen had been one of the key figures in this shadow organization. Recruited after her work on the Arecibo project, had demonstrated both her scientific brilliance and her ability to think beyond conventional limitations. Her sacrifice in the final battle had saved not just Earth, but the entire human expansion into space. As Earth grew larger in the viewscreen, Hayes reflected on what the victory meant. Humanity had faced extinction and emerged stronger than before. The Zilani had underestimated the species they were trying to conquer, assuming that a civilization that appeared to be confined to a single planet would be helpless against their advanced technology. They had been wrong. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their military capabilities. It was their ability to adapt, to innovate, and to refuse to surrender even in the face of overwhelming odds. The aliens had spent centuries studying human behavior, but they had missed the most important aspect of human nature: the willingness to sacrifice everything to protect what they loved. The Zilani had reached out first, offering false friendship while planning conquest. But their arrival had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping among the stars. The human warship's arrival had silenced them forever, and in doing so, had announced to the galaxy that Earth's children were no longer hiding in the shadows. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. As the Defiance docked with the secret lunar stations that were now revealed to the world, Admiral Hayes knew that this victory was just the beginning. There would be other threats, other challenges to overcome, but humanity had proven something important that day. They were not prey. They were predators, and they were coming for the stars. The aliens had reached out first, but it would be humanity that would determine how the story ended.